I love the time that we're in right now. When it comes to cameras and lenses, there have always been cheap lenses out there. There's always been cheaper options. But the difference now is that the cheap lenses are getting good. But honestly, how good can this $159 lens be? Let's talk about it. When myself or any other YouTubers that cover cameras and tech sit down in front of you and talk, it's often about the latest and greatest, whether it's the camera body, the sensor, the rumors, the latest and greatest phone, what this can do now, what's just hit the market, and if it's worth it for you. And as time goes on, I'm really starting to realize that I need to focus more on what's in front of the sensor, whether that be, lighting, composition, storytelling, or in this case, the lens. Now, I was on a search for a lens for my Fujifilm X-Pro2 that had a low profile for travel or street photography, and the one that first came to mind was the Fujifilm 27mm pancake lens. But then I noticed the TTArtisan 27mm, and it's not as slim as the Fujifilm offering, coming in at 29mm thick versus 23mm, but for less than half the price, it's close enough for me. It's also worth mentioning that at the time of filming this video, the Fujifilm 27mm f2.8 is currently out of stock everywhere you look, if you want to buy it brand new. So this may be the next best option if you're in the market for one. I also tend to gravitate towards lenses that have a bit more character, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let's start off at the beginning. TTArtisan as a company was established back in 2019 in Shenzhen, China, and their focus has been making solid glass at a competitive price, and in my opinion, they have done just that. This 27mm lens is the 2022 upgrade model. After searching the internet, I think the upgrade distinction means that it has the firmware update from 2022 and also includes the dock that has like the dock back cap thing that has, the USB-C port on it, and it allows you to update the firmware, but only with Windows PC, and only with Windows PC that's running Windows 10. Like, you can't have one that's running Windows 11. And I actually plugged it into the only PC that I have in my house and tried to run a firmware upgrade that said it improved, stability and battery consumption, but I could not because my PC is running Windows 11, and I don't think it's worth the hassle of trying to downgrade the software on the PC. So there's that. There are a few things I honestly wasn't expecting for only 160 bucks. Number one being the fact that this has a metal housing throughout, top to bottom. I was completely expecting to see this lens be made of, some type of plastic composite material, but it's 100% aluminum from the barrel to the lens mount, and that's a welcome addition. Next up, I really wasn't expecting a nice little aperture ring. Maybe I'm just out of the loop when it comes to these budget photography lenses, but I've seen some in the past and they've always lacked the aperture ring. And maybe I've just been using too many cheap lenses in the past. Maybe this category has grown quite a bit, but this was a pleasant surprise to me. Also, I was really surprised that this has pretty decent autofocus. Now, of course, take this with a grain of salt. I'm testing this on the Fujifilm X-Pro2, which is quite an older camera. I'm not using it on the latest and greatest Fujifilm body. And also I don't use this for video. So all I needed to do is have single spot focus or continuous focus here and there, depending on if I'm taking a photo of my daughter or a stationary object. And typically, from what I've seen from TTArtisan or any of these budget Fujifilm X-mount lenses online, is that they normally are able to keep the cost low by having a manual focus design. But the 27mm has the STM stepping motor, so it's pretty smooth, it's quick autofocus, and like I said, it's not super loud either. And round out the specs, this lens has a 0.35mm focusing distance and weighs only 93 grams and comes in either black or a titanium color. Now let's talk about what matters. How do the pictures look? You let me know. 27mm on the crop sensor of my X-Pro2 is a 40mm full frame equivalency, and I have been on record saying that I am not the biggest fan of the 35mm equivalent built-in lens on the X100 series, and that is because it's a little too wide in most cases for my taste. And it's all subjective. It's, like I said, my taste. And I do tend to lean closer to like the 50mm world as a personal preference, but I'm noticing that 40mm is a really nice sweet spot. As I mentioned before, this lens has a nice character to it, and it kind of has like a modern vintage look in my opinion. You get great center sharpness and this really nice swirly bokeh when shooting an f2.8, which is kind of surprising to even say that you get nice shallow swirly bokeh f2.8 on a crop sensor lens, crop sensor camera. It's kind of crazy, right? Because like normally you would associate the swirly bokeh at like, you know, maybe 0.95 on full frame, or 1.2, or, you know, 1.0, something like that, some super shallow f-stop. But this is, you know, cutting light a bit, maintaining sharpness, and still giving you a good shallow, cool, swirly, character-filled bokeh. My go-to Fuji lens has been the 35mm f1.4 because of its character, and this 27mm shares some of that same sauce, but with a much slimmer profile. A lot of people will say some of the older Fuji lenses, like the 35mm, I think also the 18mm 1.2 is in there. There's a few lenses that have the character, you know, tag on them. They're not super clinical, and this lens shares some of that same DNA in my opinion. And honestly, my favorite photo taken with this lens has to be this one, of this leaf. Like, granted, this isn't, you know, the most awe-inspiring subject matter, but the sun was peeking through these branches and it hit the backside of this leaf perfectly. It was like illuminating the veins just right. Like, I was like, wow, this is a cool moment to capture, and I did. And that focus fall off and swirl that I mentioned earlier is on full display here. And this is an f2.8 single center shot spot focus. Boom. I think I took 1 or 2 photos and I got it. I nailed the focus instantly. Like I said, one of my favorite trends over the last 5 years or so is the fact that tech is getting cheaper, and cheaper tech is getting good. And the barrier of entry has consistently lowered year over year, and there are also more players in the game nowadays. There's more companies making more things. And we also see this trend in cinema lenses, whether it be SLR Magic, DZO, Nisi, you know, Rokinon, or whoever. Just to name a few, but it's nice to see that trend carry over to photography glass as well. Now, if you're in the market for a pancake style lens and the first party Fujifilm 27mm is either out of your price range or out of stock, you owe it to yourself to check out the TTArtisan 27mm f2.8. And hopefully you enjoyed this video and the photos that I've shared and shown to you today. If you want to get, you know, the inside scoop on what I'm creating or testing when it comes to photography, go ahead and check out my social links down below in the comments. But it's been a pleasure as usual. Until next time, stay fresh. Peace.